All right, it's 9:59. Good morning, welcome. I'm John Wall with Burr Foreman, and we're a pleasure to be here at the Municipal Association of South Carolina. I'm glad all of you are here with us today for this presentation. I think you'll find it helpful. I have Scott Slyden here with the Municipal Association of South Carolina. He's the Director of Advocacy and Communications. Got a political science degree from Winthrop and a master's in public administration from George Mason. He's been with MASC since 2008, and his current role oversees all the association's legislative, communications, and outreach functions. Before MASC, he worked on Capitol Hill, and he also was a city manager in North Carolina. A town manager in North Carolina, city manager in South Carolina, and obviously was instrumental in getting this piece of legislation passed. To my right, I have Caitlin Cawthorn, the manager for local revenue services here at MASC. She's got her undergrad from Clemson and a master's in public administration from the College of Charleston. And she's also a former city manager. And at the very end of our presentation, Jeff and I's presentation, she will be going through Okay. All right. Good. Yep. I think I cut out, but bottom line is Jeff is the big brains of the group. He's been practicing law for 16 years. And any tax specific type questions, we're going to direct to him, and feel free to ask those. With that, I'm going to kind of kick it over to Caitlin real quick to kind of show you how to use the actual system, and then I'll introduce myself and we'll get going.
Yes. So the first thing I'm going to show you is just a screenshot here of what you will see at the top right of your screen if you're joining us on a computer or your phone. And I just wanted to go over each one of these icons in case you're not familiar with Teams. So this icon with the people will show you the list of participants that are in the meeting. This chat bubble right here obviously is if you want to type a question instead of asking it verbally, you'll go there, you'll type your question in, and we'll be able to see it. This little icon with the hand and the smiley face is like a raise your hand. So if you have a question that you want to ask over the speaker, if you're on your phone, I believe you have to hit *6 to unmute yourself, but just hit the raise your hand button and we'll get to you. Now, this turns your video on and off, the little video icon, and this microphone, obviously, if you're on your computer, turns your voice on and off. So mutes you or unmutes you. Now, if you're on your phone, like I said, *6 is what you'll want to hit to do that. So.
Perfect. And I'm John Wall. I'm with Burr Foreman. I'm an attorney over there that do primarily economic development and government relations. That's a nice way to say that I'm a lobbyist. I've worked a lot with you on the call today, and I'm just a lucky guy that got put in the right situation at the right times. And this is one of those instances, working with a lot of great teammates. On the call, Roger Buckley with Sunoco, the South Carolina Manufacturers Alliance Tax Committee Chairman, where I used to be the General Counsel and Vice President of Government Relations when this legislation went down, and also Charles Hamrick, Kristen Blanchard. I see there's a bunch of folks that were instrumental in this legislation. So looking forward to reconnecting with all of you. And we want this to be an interactive presentation. So if you have questions, please stop us as we go, and then we'll move forward. All right, you should be seeing the slides right now. Obviously, we're talking today about the South Carolina Business License Tax Standardization Act, which is House Bill 4431 and Act 176. This is the overview of the presentation. Jeff's going to give a just brief overview of the state business license tax system. And then we're going to summarize the new law and the two effective dates, one which went into effect of September 30th of last year, and the other that goes into effect on January 1st. So obviously it's a very timely topic. Then Jeff and I are going to go through some highlights, some practical, pointer issues, and obviously answer questions. And then lastly, MASC and Caitlin is going to walk you through how to use the portal that the Revenue and Fiscal Affairs and MASC are hosting. All right, with that, I'm going to kick it over to Jeff to give an overview of business license taxes.
Thanks, John. I suspect most people on the call are probably familiar with our business license tax regime, but all municipalities and counties in South Carolina are authorized to impose a business license tax. That's done through local ordinances. Most jurisdictions have used the municipal association's model ordinance, sometimes with tweaks. But each ordinance can be different and needs to be reviewed if you have any questions regarding the ordinance. Ordinance or the business license tax, it's kind of a dual purpose tax. It's been what we'd call an excise tax for the privilege of doing business in a jurisdiction. And it serves to obviously raise revenue for the jurisdiction, but also has a regulatory function. Businesses that are doing business in a jurisdiction are generally subject to the tax. So if you are doing business in a jurisdiction, you're required to obtain a license before you conduct business. It's an annual tax. It's based on rate classification and gross income. In the past, there's been a lot of excitement over what constitutes gross income. And in fact, I think 16 years ago, the first case I worked on out of law school was actually the Kiger case, which was an interesting case on gross income and interstate gross income that went to our Supreme Court, where they found that all income can be included in gross income. And right now we've got about 230 municipalities in 9 counties that are imposing business license tax. John.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeff. And again, if you have any questions, please, you can unmute yourself and ask and pipe up as we go along. All right, so we're going to move into a quick summary of the actual legislation, actual law. So quick history, as most of y'all might know, it's been over a decade of business license tax reform measures that have legislation and so forth. And it was a lot of old historical barriers to overcome in order to get this legislation passed. I will be the first to admit the legislation is absolutely not perfect. No piece of legislation is. It will be litigated, and that's why you need folks like Jeff and so forth if you have any questions. But it was truly a team effort, and it could not have been done without all different types of perfect storms that kind of came in together in order to get it done. The original bill was filed in 2019, which changed gross receipts of the basis for the tax to the business taxable income, obviously, and profits. That was a no-go for certain parties, and we worked through that. And even though it was filed in April of 2019, there was not enough time in the legislative session to get it passed. But there were some very aggressive third-party contingency fee operators that I think their overly aggressive behavior gave us some momentum, the business community momentum, to get a budget proviso adopted. So that happened by Senator Ronnie Cromer from Newberry. That was passed in 2019. A budget proviso is a temporary law. So it's something that's attached to the budget. It's only in effect for that fiscal year until permanent legislation can be passed. So in the 2019 budget proviso, it really did 3 things. It prohibited these third-party private entities from and others from setting up a portal for the administration of business license tax until a compromise could be reached. And then also prohibited third-party entities from assessing, which is an important term, business license taxes on a contingency fee basis. And then also created this giant study committee to research what proper business license tax reform could be. So the Municipal Association had a representative on that study committee that met throughout the summer of throughout the fall and of 2019 until the next legislative year. Roger Buckley from the Manufacturers Alliance was on it. The state chamber and several other business groups were on it. And then some of the legislators had their appointees on that. So that big study committee met several times and worked through the issues. And then, you know, from April 2019 until September, obviously, of 2021, a lot of things happened. Most importantly, obviously, COVID. So we negotiated this, renegotiated it, negotiated again, renegotiated, got amended by the House, got amended in committees. We thought we had, Scott and I sat here with some key individuals in the storm on a late Friday night. Roger Buckley's on the phone. What we thought was a compromise and a really great piece of legislation, but then it went through the legislative sausage making process and was amended several times, and eventually went to a conference committee in September of 2019 because the session, or 2021, because the session was delayed because of COVID, with 3 senators and then 3 House members to iron out the legislation, and then it almost died even after that. So anyway, it's a long way of saying it was a very, very hard process with a lot of different interested stakeholders that resulted in a pretty good piece of legislation that helps out the business community tremendously. And Governor McMaster signed it into law on September 30th, and Jay Jordan, the key proponent of the bill, had a big bill signing ceremony with the business community and the municipal association and others, all the stakeholders, to say, hoorah, look what we did. But it was really a great day for businesses in South Carolina. And then after the legislation was passed, there was still some, I guess, uncertainty, or in order to have a protective measure put in place on these contingency fees. The Attorney General, at Jay Jordan's request, the bill sponsor, issued an Attorney General opinion that I'll discuss a little bit later. All right. A general overview. It does 3 things. The law does 3 things: provides comprehensive business license tax reform. It creates a uniform system for the administration and collection of business license taxes. And it also limits the role that third-party entities can play in assessing and collecting these taxes. And there's 2 separate effective dates in the legislation. And so the private contingency piece has already gone into effect as soon as the bill was signed into law on September 30th of 2020. And then on January 1st, this coming January, is really when a lot of the key reform measures will go into place that we'll discuss later. And then obviously Caitlin will give a review of the portal that is live, that will be able to be used starting January 1st for all the businesses. All right, I'm gonna hit the provisions that were effective on September 30th because they were key during the negotiation process, as well as the other ones. But then Jeff is going to go into the ones that are going to go into effect on January 1st because they're more tax focused. All right, on September 30th, third-party entities on a contingency fee basis are prohibited from doing certain activities. They can't assess business license taxes. They're not required for a business to collect to give out confidential information. They can't contact you if you tell them to stop, which is important. And they can't say that, hey, you're required to give me this information. And they can't. I highlighted the last point about contacting the business in a manner that a third-party entity knows or should know would create any meaningful business interruption. Obviously, very loosey-goosey, but the way that I take that, and the reason that's in there was, some of our manufacturing members and business communities were getting harassed by third-party entities. I've got example emails for some of the companies. But bottom line is, if you tell them to stop, they should not be contacting you. And if they keep contacting you, or if you have any questions, you should call Jeff and I, and for a few bucks, we'll be able to steer you in the right direction and advise you. Also, what a taxing jurisdiction cannot share or disclose any information related to the business license tax applications with any third-party entity, other than to acknowledge that whether or not a business has paid that business license tax for a relevant year. And that's important. One of the key components and the key problems with these contingency fee operators is they're banned from doing this in a lot of other states, North Carolina including, and there was one aggressive behavior North Carolina company that was coming down to South Carolina and doing the activity they were prohibited from doing in their home state here in South Carolina. And they're overly aggressive. So they were contacting businesses and saying, you owe this money, and businesses were paying money that they might not have owed because of this overly aggressive behavior, because they were getting paid on a contingency basis, i.e. the more money they collect from the municipality, the more money they got paid. So it encourages overly aggressive behavior, which we don't, with the business community, did not agree with. Also, the ability or having the government, which is a quintessential function, obviously, of collecting and assessing taxes, we believe belongs to the government, right? And in that process, the government gets very highly confidential business information. And when it goes out to a third party, we were very, very concerned with, competitors getting access to that information, i.e. Publix might want to know what Walmart's making, gross receipts, right? So it's very confidential information, and business confidential information was a high priority for the legislation. So this was important. All right, penalties. This was a huge provision in the new law, and it's something that you need to pay attention to, especially if you're being contacted by these third-party entities. I don't like to brag on myself, but this was my idea because if we're not gonna have a law with teeth in it, how are we going to enforce it, right? And it's still not perfect. It's not as strong as I want it to be, but this was part of the compromise. There is a private cause of action that's created where a taxpayer can sue a taxing jurisdiction or the third-party entity for any violations to do one of the two or both, stop the action that's prohibited under the law from happening, and then also to recover any actual monetary losses for such a violation, or receive $500 in damages for each violation, whichever is greater. And then there also is a provision in there that if the court finds that the defendant willfully or knowingly, which is a higher standard on the law, and again, Jeff can, he's a big brains of the bunch, he can explain that a little bit better. But bottom line, if you, the way I read it and the way that it was talked about when we were negotiating it was, if you tell the third party entity to stop and then they continue, they're willful, and you say you are violating section 61400 and they continue to do it, I would argue that's willful and knowing violation of the law, and those damages can be increased to what's called treble damages, which is triple the amount. I try to get attorney fees and costs and all that stuff in there as well. They did not go for that, unfortunately, but that's where we are. All right. What are third-party entities and taxing jurisdictions allowed to do? They can specifically still do the following: collect delinquent business license taxes only if these two conditions are met. The taxing jurisdiction approves the proposed assessed taxes, i.e. the city, county, if it's a county, approves the assessment of the taxes, and the business runs their entire course of appealing the proposed assessment. So not until all of the new concrete reform measures for the appeal process have run their course can a third party entity collect delinquent taxes on a contingency fee basis. And then I put the AG's opinion here that I mentioned earlier. Taxing jurisdictions may only engage third parties providing debt services on a contingency basis for services related to the collection of delinquent taxes on a contingency fee basis. Again, the AG opinion is not binding. This is a new law. Again, it will be litigated. There will be court cases that come out about some of this, maybe this provision, I don't know. But anyway, that's where we are. Brand new law goes into effect January 1st. These are provisions that are already in effect. And then with that, I'm going to kick it over to Jeff, and he's going to kind of really get into the meat of the reform measures that go into effect on January 1st. Jeff?
Thanks, John. Yep, January 1st, less than a month away. The reform measures that are more in the nature of standardization and substantive changes will go into effect. One of the biggest changes, biggest things with the bill that I think was good for the business community was clarification on gross income for business license tax purposes. We've got clarification, if you have a business that's domiciled in one jurisdiction, you exclude income that's earned outside of that jurisdiction if the business license tax is paid to the other jurisdiction. And that's not a change. That's how our business licenses have worked in the past. Businesses without a domicile, we're clarifying that the only income that's going to be subject to the business license fee in that jurisdiction is the income they received accruing from doing business in that jurisdiction. Manufacturers will receive the biggest benefit will receive the biggest benefit from the bill. The gross income from them for manufacturers is now going to be the lesser of gross income collected from business done at the manufacturing location, which may be zero. The amount of income allocated in a portion to the location for state income tax purposes, which is important. It's not federal, it's state in apportioned. Or the amount of expenses attributable to the location to the cost center of doing business. And what I've seen in the past in my practice is that cost center of doing business was oftentimes used as a basis for coming up with a fair tax base for manufacturers that otherwise would have high income if looking at their multi-state operations. The reform measures are going to help streamline business license tax compliance for businesses. It's one of the big benefits, and it does it by creating uniformity throughout the jurisdictions that are imposing a business license tax. So we now have a standardized filing period, a licensing year of May 1st to April 30th, and that's through every jurisdiction starting April 1st, 2022. There's a standard application, business license tax application that every jurisdiction will be required to accept. We've got a standardized class schedule, classification schedule for businesses that will be updated every 2 years, used for businesses. And we have, importantly, in my world, a new appeals process that's been codified that provides a clear path for businesses that disagree with the jurisdiction's administration of the business license tax, an administrative and judicial remedy to address that. As I'll mix up my bullets a little here. Importantly, there are a lot of agreements that have been reached between larger businesses and local jurisdictions regarding their business license taxes, how they're calculated, what their base is going to be. The new legislation importantly preserves all of those agreements at the option of the taxpayer. And as we'll get into with Caitlin, there's now going to be a portal that allows businesses to pay all their business license taxes in one place for all jurisdictions. With that, I'll invite John back up, and we were going to hit on a couple of our experience-based observations and some pointers and things that we got through in our experience.
And again, if you have any questions, please, please just unmute yourself and be happy to answer those here, or we have an official spot next. But as we go along, if you have any questions about these, so I think Jeff's gonna start off with the first one.
Yeah, so I think, manufacturers, as we just went over, you've got 3 options for determining gross income now. So you've got to do a little legwork on your own to figure out which one is going to be best for you.
That's perfect. And then, as I mentioned earlier, if you receive any communication from a third-party entity, you're probably going to want to ask them to stop the communication, go direct with the municipal association and/or the municipality that they're claiming that you owe the taxes to, and confirm based off the ordinance, or talk to a tax attorney. There's de minimis exceptions. Actually, Scott's helped me out with some businesses in that regard, and said, yeah, this is de minimis and so forth. So kind of attorney, and then under the law, the local government, you want to check their ordinance too, to make sure that they have an ordinance passed as required under the law, that they can contract with these third parties, because that is a new requirement. So the local ordinance has to authorize the municipality to have the contract. So you want to check that. And then also you're going to want to check that, the jurisdiction, taxing jurisdiction has a contract, because that's also required in the law. So just 2 things you want to look for again, happy to discuss that further. Take any questions.
Yeah, and one, the business license tax is probably the most ignored tax I see in site selection, expansions and other things. That's something that kind of needs to, I think, get on some folks' radars a little sooner. And we see it come up sometimes in odd situations. We've had clients who have been on septic and are expanding and then need city water service. And then I find out, wait, if I do that, then I'm going to be annexed. I'm going to be subject to business license fee. And if all those things are kind of addressed on the front end, you can usually reach a fair agreement. But if they pop up after everything has occurred, then oftentimes you will have a surprisingly large business license tax bill.
Yeah, that's perfect. And that is a big consideration for businesses for you all out there. Obviously got to have water, but the economic development piece, Jeff and I both do economic development. And he is exactly right. Business license taxes are one of the overlooked liabilities that you can negotiate on the front end. It does require municipalities to agree to that. Right. And you obviously want to have a good relationship with your municipalities, your counties, your cities, your towns where you are. Right. Don't be overly greedy, but we advise on all those different types of tax incentives from a holistic approach. Have a great team that can help out on property tax, sales tax, income tax, you name it, and also business license taxes. And in that vein, businesses also want to consider entering into business license tax agreements. Again, it allows the municipalities have to agree to it. But it's section 6(1)(400) in the legislation. H1 preserves existing agreements at the election of the taxing at the taxpayer. The taxpayer can say, actually, no, we don't like that one anymore. We believe that under the new laws, we're a manufacturer, we're domiciled here, it's the lesser of, da 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 da. But whether they're formal or informal, i.e. a handshake or an email, that type of stuff, they're preserved for the existing ones. And then under H2, you're specifically, the taxing jurisdictions are allowed to, again, they're not required to, they're allowed to enter into a business license tax agreement with a business going forward. And again, those can be formal or informal. As an attorney, the way I've done it in the past, I would prefer, if you can, having an ordinance, which requires more readings and so forth. You could get in a resolution, but you do want something, even though it can be informal, you want something to hang your hat on. And so I would recommend an ordinance if possible and negotiating that from it.
You have a question. Will you be providing a list of all the counties and municipalities that require the tax? We can put that together for you.
Yeah, definitely. There's 9 counties and there was 230 before this legislation. But Scott, you want to take that? I think some have kind of yeah.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah. So, and let's put it back on the camera here.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are a number, 230 some odd cities and towns across the state that levy the business license tax. As we've gone through the conversion to the new model ordinance that's required by the statute, some particularly smaller cities and towns have elected to just simply repeal their business license tax. But we are in the process of working with all of our cities and towns across the state to try and get on the model ordinance and be ready to go. Do I need to come over? You can't see me? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. John and I were actually talking about this just before we started the program, that it was maybe halfway through the negotiating process and because of the timing and the delays that were put upon us by the General Assembly and of course by COVID, that we at the association began to realize we're not going to have enough time to get our cities and towns converted over to meet the original effective date that was in the bill originally. And so we went back with our partners, our business partners, and explained to them the difficulty that we would have with a very narrow window at the time. So we got the effective date enacted to January 1st of 2022. And we are almost finished converting all of the cities and towns and all 9 counties over to the model business license ordinance. And they are nearly ready to all use and accept your payments through the business license tax portal through the renewal center in the renewal season next spring. So we're proud of that. We got a little bit of work left to do, but in time for that deadline of April the 30th, which is set by the statute, all of our cities and towns and counties should be ready to accept your payments. So
Perfect. Yeah. So if you don't mind, you'll get us the list of the current lists. And if you want a copy of this recording and then also the slides and a copy of that list, we'll send it out to all the attendees, or you can email Jeff and I. Our email address is I think on the last slide.
It's back on your presentation. Oh, that's not it. Pretty much wrapped up on the presentation.
Yeah. I think we are.
Okay.
And the real meat of it now is the portal, obviously. But we'll be around. Jeff and I'll be around to answer any questions. But without further ado, we'll turn it over to Caitlin and she'll describe and get a walk through the portal. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to step back in too. Come on, Caitlin. The Municipal Association has been has been very pleased with the work that we've been able to do with our business partners throughout this entire process. As John and Jeff explained, it was difficult. The business license tax was something that was mostly grumbled about by businesses of all sizes, large and small, for many, many years. And of course, the General Assembly had launched a number of attacks on the business license tax, the municipal and the county business license tax. And we were happy to be able to finally find some partners to move forward with doing some standardization that we agreed needed to be done because of the confusion that the business license tax, particularly the way it was administered from city to city and county to county. We think that this is a good piece of legislation, the work that we've done in order to get our cities and towns to do the same administrative tasks at the same way across the state is going to be a benefit not only to them, but certainly to the business community. And so to that end, the statute mandated an online renewal system, a business license renewal system, as John mentioned, so that every business that does business in a city or town or county that requires a business license tax across the state can go to one place and pay renew all of their business licenses at the same time with one payment. And so we at the Municipal Association, a number of years ago, even before the legislation was really beginning to be negotiated.
Before I started here.
Caitlin, but even before Caitlin came to work here, this is one of the reasons that we brought her on the staff many years ago, was that the Municipal Association's Board of Directors committed to our own resources to develop a piece of software to allow you to be able to renew your business license taxes as easily as possible. And one of our previous executive directors, her vision for this was to make this like just as easy as filling out your taxes on TurboTax or some other online tax tool. And so we have worked for the last 3 years, spent $1 million-ish on this software, and then obviously have been able to partner with our business partners and partner with the South Carolina Office of Revenue and Fiscal Affairs to accomplish what we think is a good piece of work. And so Caitlin's going to demonstrate to you now how this software works and explain to you when it's going to be available. And I'll let her manage, as she does so deftly, the questions and answers as we go forward. Caitlin.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. I think you may be giving me more credit than you should, but I appreciate that. So I would like for you, if you have a question as we go along, to continue and ask your questions while I'm on that screen so that I can answer them before we move on. Again, if you are calling in on the phone and you're muted, I believe it's *6 to unmute if you have a question. But if you put it into the chat, I'll try to keep an eye on that as well. And we have other individuals that are helping me do that. So if you will give me one moment just to make sure I have everything pulled up here I need. We're constantly switching back and forth between presenters up here. Okay, so before I begin, let me say Scott kind of alluded to this, but the idea behind this was to make licensing easier for businesses. As we at the association started to dig in and to what was going on with business licensing, we also began to see the vast differences in deadlines and penalty dates and the way things were handled. So even before the bill, we tried to begin encouraging our cities and counties to some extent to create some type of standardization. So in addition to this online renewal center, there's also a standard application that you can use. You should be able to get that from any taxing jurisdiction. You can also go to our website and get it. Just be sure that you mail it to where you're trying to get the business license, and do not mail it back here to me at the association, because I can't do anything with that. So today I'm going to be showing you the test site, because obviously I can't log into production and show you that because, well, one, I don't have access to that by law. So we're in the test site. When you first go to the website, and actually the web address is going to be localblrenewal.com. So localblrenewal.com is where you're going to go. You're going to select Get Started the very first time that you come to this. It's going to tell you, hey, these are the individual cities and counties that are using this currently. There may be some that are not using it beginning in January because they are still trying to get all of their data standardized, get all of their information together. And for them to use it in January, they have to be ready to go January 1. We're very close to that deadline. I believe Scott might have said we have about 10 that we're still working with. So if you go down through here and you see who you're looking for is not using it, you can just click on the name. And again, this is test data, so this is not accurate information in here. And it'll give you the contact information for who you need to reach out to and speak to them. But I'm going to hit continue, and I'm going to enter my information. Now, this should be the information for the individual, ideally, who is the owner of the business. You can also put in whoever's handling your business license taxes for you. But when you go in, and I'll show you on the next screens, it's going to ask you for the owner name. So before you get ready to do this, make sure that you have your renewal form in front of you. It's going to have your NAICS code, which is your national identifier. It stands for North American Industry Classification System code. It's going to have your business license account number. It should also have the name of the owner. Those are all things that you're going to need to create your account once you start the renewal. So I am just going to enter some. Let's see, let's do. Obviously, this is the test site, so I'm just making things up. Fran on my staff created these accounts for me, so that's why it says Fran's work. All right, I'm gonna hit continue. Now you can see at the top, and the entire process is like this. It shows you how many steps are in the process up here and where you're at. So it says confirm account. I've sent a link to your email address. So I'm gonna say finished. I'm gonna go back to that email account. There is the email. It's going to come from the South Carolina Business License Portal. I'm going to click confirm email inside of that. It says I'm confirmed and I can sign in. And that's how you'll create your account for the first time. Once you've done that, then every time after that that you come back to this, you just go to the account sign in and you log in. I'm going to use a different email to show you the test data that I have in here. So after you create your account, the very first time that you log in, it's going to ask you for your tax ID. And actually, Scott, I left that paper right there. Can you hand it to me? So your tax ID, if you are a sole proprietor, could possibly be your social security number, or it could be your federal employee identification number. It could be an I-10 number if you are here on a visa or permit or something. Now, your tax ID, because it is personal identifiable information, is not going to be on your renewal form. So that is something that you're going to need to know and have access to before you begin. The reason that the Renewal Center asks for your tax ID is because that is the only unique identifier across the state for that one business. So I may be doing business in 10 or 15 or 20 different cities or counties, and the only thing that is going to be the same across every single one of those jurisdictions is that tax ID number. And you'll see in a moment why we ask you for that. So I'm going to enter the tax ID for this business. Hit continue. It's asking me for the account number. So I'm just going to pick whatever renewal letter I have in front of me for whatever city it is. I believe it's Hollywood is what I'm renewing for. I'm just going to type in the account number that I have for that city. And the reason we're asking you for this information is that we just want to make sure that before we provide access to the business, to the information that these cities and counties have uploaded, we want to make sure that you are the correct person to access this information. Because what's happened on the back end is every single city is going to upload a file that has all of their business information in it. It's going to have the name of the owner, the account number, the NAICS code, the tax ID, and they're uploading it so that when you walk through this process and you get to the screen, all of that data is pre-populated for you and you don't have to manually enter it for every single business license. So let me do this. And is the owner name in there? It's not on the, is it me? So it's telling me it found 5 business licenses. It found 5 business licenses because 5 different cities or possibly, well, it's telling me right here, actually. It found licenses for me in Bennettsville, Blenheim, Clio, Hollywood, and Barnville. So I'm going to say, great. Now, if you have licenses in other cities and they're not showing up or they don't get pulled in, you have the ability to add those licenses as well. But again, we're trying to reduce the workload that is on you for renewing. So I'm going to say continue. Now this is what your home screen is going to look like. Again, I'm going to say that I'm in test. So this yellow line up here, it's not accurate, but that's because I'm in the test environment. Obviously, it's not September 1st. Now, this is your dashboard. This is what we call your dashboard. You have the ability to sort this dashboard, to minimize it. So if you have multiple businesses with multiple tax IDs, you can add another tax ID to your user account. You can minimize it so you can look at each tax ID individually. You can filter it. Say, I don't want to look at my data by this tax ID. I want to look at it by jurisdiction. And then it shows it to you by jurisdiction. So we tried to make it as easy and user-friendly as possible. If I have another license, so adding a tax ID is if I have another business that I need to add to my account. I would add another license if there is a license I need to renew that is not showing up on this screen. Just a quick overview of what you're seeing on this screen. Frequently asked questions, obviously you go there to, if you have any issues, and I would encourage you to go there first before you reach out to the taxing jurisdiction. But if you need to talk to the taxing jurisdiction at any time, their contact information is on every single screen that you're going to see in here. So City of Bennettsville, this is who you would contact. This is their email, their phone number. The same for Blenheim, everyone. And you will see that on every single screen in this process if you need to contact them. We have nothing in our cart because we haven't walked through the renewal process yet and added a license to pay. Renewal data. So we started getting questions from some test cities that were using this about trying to assist business users, but they had no access to the screens that the business users had access to. And so they were having a hard time helping them walk through the process. So what we've done is we have incorporated the ability for you to share your screens with them. So if you want the jurisdiction that you're renewing for to see your data to help you walk through the process, you say allow jurisdiction to view my data. They are only going to be able to see data that is relevant to them. So Bennettsville is only going to be able to see Bennettsville's data. Blenheim is only going to see Blenheim's data. They're not going to see the big picture. And again, they're only going to be able to see this if you give them access. If you want to give them access long enough just to help you through the process and then revoke that access, you can do that too. So you just simply go over there and say, I'm done, I'm going to revoke access. And again, we're just trying to make it so you have the best experience, and we are giving as much information as we legally can to these cities to help you get through this process. Again, if you call us by law, we don't have access to this data. There is no way at the association that we can download this data or collect it or consolidate it or anything like that. So one more thing that I wanted to mention, the question about how do I know the list of taxing jurisdictions? We are working with the South Carolina Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office because they are the state controller essentially of all boundary and annexation data in the state of South Carolina. So our plan is to have a link somewhere up here at the top that you can go to and type in the address of where you're doing business, and it'll tell you what city and county you're in and if that city or county has a business license tax. So anytime, day or night, you can log in and do that so you will know upfront. So I'm going to go down to Hollywood. There's no questions. Y'all yell at me if y'all see questions pop up. I'm going to go down to Hollywood and I'm going to say start my renewal. If at any point I don't want to renew, maybe I'm not doing business in any city, I just say do not renew. And it's going to ask me for a reason. I sold it. I'm no longer doing business there. If I say other reason, it'll allow me to type an answer in there. But I'm just going to tell them I sold it. Yes. So you'll see it says do not renew. If you do this by accident, at any time you can go back and start the renewal. So Hollywood, let's start our renewal. Again, the idea behind this was to make it simple as it is to pay taxes with TurboTax. That's what our previous executive director used to say. I want it to mimic the TurboTax model because that is so simple. So what we've done is shown you a 6-step process, and you can see where you are in the process, and you can go back at any time. Again, this is a test, so your help questions are not, they don't make any sense right here on this screen, but every help question changes based on what step you're in the process. So in production on this page, it might say, you know, why are you asking me these questions? What is the definition of business activity? Those types of things. And the questions change based on the screen that you're in. So it's asking me if any of these things have changed. And no, the answer is none of these things have changed. So I'm going to continue. It's asking for a mailing address. I have the ability to say use the physical address of the business because as you can see up here, my physical address is listed. And this green dot means that it is inside the city limits of Hollywood. That's what that little green icon is telling me. If it was red, it would mean that that business is not located inside the city limits. So I'm just going to tell them to use my physical address instead of entering a separate mailing address and continue. At any time, if something comes up, we know that you're busy, you can just do save and return home. And when you come back in and you hit that start renewal button, it's going to bring you to whatever step you left off on. I'm going to enter my total gross. Here it tells you that if you have deductions, you'll enter those on the next screen. It also says to report your total gross income as reported to the Internal Revenue Service. Now, as you know, as we just talked about, this is different for manufacturers. So you would need to know that up front. We could probably also put a help question in there specifically for manufacturers. So I'm going to continue. Apply deductions. I don't have any deductions I need to apply. I'm located in Hollywood. I do all my business in Hollywood. I didn't pay a business license tax anywhere else, so I'm going to continue. If I do want to add a deduction at any time, it's as simple as selecting this, telling them that I paid a license to another jurisdiction. I paid one to a jurisdiction that's not located in South Carolina, or I have another reason, and it will allow me to type in my description and the amount of gross revenue that I reported, because they don't need to know what you paid in the tax to another city. They need to know how much gross income you're deducting from what you're reporting to them. But I'm going to delete that because I don't need to add a deduction and continue. Upload supporting documentation. If documentation is required by that jurisdiction, it's going to tell you right here the type of document that is required and why it is required by ordinance. It also tells you what types of file types you can upload. but I'm not going to upload anything and I'm going to continue. If documentation is required by that jurisdiction, that city or county, it's not going to let you submit the business license until you upload that documentation. So you can type any comments to them here. You can say gross income is less than last year if you feel like they need to know that up front, and they'll see that. I'm going to certify that I am the individual submitting this and hit add to cart. Now I have the ability to do multiple at one time. So if I want to continue this and walk through these steps again and submit another one. So you can see what multiple in the cart look like. The idea behind this was so that you didn't have to walk through the entire license application and pay, and then walk through the entire license application again and pay again. We wanted you to be able to do all of it at one time. So I'm going to say pay. Now, the processing fees for the renewal center are through a company called Stripe, and they charge 2.9% plus 30 cents. And, oh, okay. And then the ACH fee is also through Stripe, and that is a 0.08% that caps at a max of $5. You never pay more than $5. What's the question?
Will the gross income have to be reported to every place and then deductions by every location?
Yes. The gross income does have to be reported to every single city that you're, or county that you're getting a license for. And you just need to report to them whatever deductions you're taking from that gross income. Does that answer?
And there's one more.
Okay.
Does gross revenue include revenue on out of state or out of county? Out of country transactions?
Scott, you want to talk to that?
Yeah, so what you're doing is simply attributing, if you're working in multiple jurisdictions and multiple cities, and you earn $10,000 in gross income in one city and $10,000 in gross income in another city, then you're simply reporting that gross income that you earn in each city or county for the business license tax purposes. So if your total income was $20,000 for the calendar year, then, and you worked in two separate cities, you wouldn't report all 20,000 in both cities. You would just simply report 10,000 in one, 10,000 in other. That way, you're not paying the tax to two cities on the same on the same gross income. That's where the idea of the deduction comes in. So you deduct from your total from what you report to each jurisdiction. So if you're a resident business in particular, so if you're a city here, if you're a business here in the city of Columbia and you earn $100,000 in total gross income, but 50 of that is earned in Lexington, then you would pay 50 to Lexington and then report your total gross in Columbia as 100, but you would tell the renewal center and the city of Columbia, hey, I earned 50,000 in Lexington and I've paid a tax there, so I'm going to deduct that 50.
Yeah.
Right.
And you would only do this for the place where you're domiciled.
That's right.
So for example, since you're not domiciled in Lexington in this example, you don't need to tell Lexington that you paid Columbia a business license.
Right.
Did you want to?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and there are various different definitions of gross income based on what your actual business is. So again, Jeff hit up earlier, your gross income, if you're a manufacturer, you got the lesser of three different choices. For another example, the gross income for insurance companies means the gross premiums written, but the mechanics of what Scott and Caitlin just addressed is correct. There will be some deductions if it's been in the practice, supposed to be the practice, and everybody's just been doing before that you're deducting from your gross income, any gross income that you're paying a business license tax to another taxing jurisdiction from that other individual tax jurisdiction, but it also depends on what type of business you are.
Yeah, and let's
talk about the out of county question as well. So there are 9 counties in South Carolina that levy a business license tax. If you're supposed to pay your pay your business license tax based on your total gross income minus the income that you earn and pay a tax on to other jurisdictions. But if you are a manufacturer, so say here in Richland County, and you earn income from outside of the county, then yes, and you don't pay a business license tax to anyone else on that income, then yes, you should include that as a part of your gross income that you report to Richland County. And
Because you're domiciled.
yeah, just because you're domiciled here in Richland County and Richland County levies a business license tax. And Jeff mentioned the Kiger case earlier. This was a case of a manufacturer in the town of Hilton Head Island who wanted to deduct income from their gross that was earned outside of the town of Hilton Head Island. And the Kiger case settled that question. And I'll let Jeff talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So the Kiger case involved a manufacturer that had United States income from many different jurisdictions. Part of what they argued was it should be South Carolina income, South Carolina allocated income that is subject to the business license fee. The Supreme Court disagreed and said it is a privilege tax. The gross income's just an input into what the actual tax is going to be. And so using nationwide income in that case was okay for the base because they were domiciled here, with the caveat that if business license taxes were paid in any other state, you could deduct those in a similar manner. There hasn't been any guidance on foreign income. And I think that's something in the past we have addressed with jurisdictions on a one-on-one basis. There's nothing statutorily that addresses the foreign income piece one way or the other.
Yeah, I think to add, that's a really good point. And John, you made it earlier, is in the Kiger case, we at the Municipal Association would have probably, as to try and reach a resolution before it got all the way to the Supreme Court, said, hey, why don't you guys sit down with the town of Hilton Head Island Council and work out an agreement for what the basis of the tax is going to be outside of the definition of gross that was in their local ordinance. Of course, we have statutory language, and not in addition to that, which is a good thing, the cities and towns and counties had the express authority now to enter into these agreements with individual businesses in order to negotiate rates that are different than what are in their model or in their business license ordinance. So you have that flexibility. The local jurisdictions have that flexibility, and certainly would encourage anyone to take advantage of that or explore it if they have the opportunity or the need.
Right. And this is John. I don't know if you want to see this or not yet right now, but not to beat a dead horse, but I want to say two things. The Kiger case, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but was a South Carolina Supreme Court case. There are folks that are under the opinion that are highly respected tax experts that believe if it had gone to the U.S. Constitution, it might be, or to the U.S. Supreme Court, it might be found unconstitutional, but it didn't go there. But that's neither here nor there. To Scott's point about business license tax agreements, yes. And we do those types of agreements for fee in lieu of tax agreements, multi-county business partner agreements, special source revenue credit agreements, yada, yada, yada. Jeff and I do those. It's the same process. So it is something you would want to consider going into entering into one of those if the municipality would do it.
More questions?
More questions? Okay.
For deductions, when I previously reported for Richland County, I've been able to deduct sales into other states, but not sales outside the U.S. I've had to pay business license tax based on income for international sales. Does this change?
Let's find out who that is asking the question and answer that offline if we can.
Okay, sure.
That might be an attorney opinion.
That might be let's not answer that question on the fly.
Okay, and we'll get back to you on. And the next question is, what about construction contracts? Then where we have typically paid on the contract amount in the district?
Yes, that does not change. In fact, the statute specifically allows contractors to pay a business license tax based on a per job basis. So if you're going to do $100,000 construction job, then you can pay the business license tax just on that contract, and the tax is good until the license is good until you have to renew or the end of the project, whichever comes first.
They can still pay annually though.
And you can, yes, they can, some contractors, because they do a lot of work inside a particular jurisdiction throughout the course of the year, just pay an annual license. And then are able to renew from year to year and then account for any differences that there may be in the original amounts and the final amounts.
Okay, and, just so you know, there's a few people that want answers to that international question.
Okay, great.
And also, we said, there's another, and then Brian Rivers is asking, just to be clear, out-of-state transactions would be considered gross income in my South Carolina jurisdiction.
Correct.
Unless he paid a license to.
Yeah, unless that business is paying a license in another state, that they could deduct that gross that they paid that tax on in another state. That's certainly, allowable.
And the portal allows for them.
And the portal allows for it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if, you know, the international tax question, if you need an official legal opinion, you know, Jeff and I'd be happy to take those questions as well. It's very nuanced, right? And you want to have something to hang your hat on, you know, and also I think we have some folks from FedEx potentially on the call or some other wholesalers. There's a specific definition for wholesalers, and they're exempt from business license taxes unless they maintain a warehouse distribution establishment within a taxing jurisdiction. So what I'm saying is it's very heavily nuanced and it depends on your exact industry. So it's something you're gonna want to consider, get with your tax experts, your accountants, tax attorneys like Jeff that had the big brains to sort through.
I will specifically for FedEx, UPS, other motor carriers. Motor carriers aren't required to pay a local business license tax, so you're okay. But depending on your warehousing or your location, you may or may not have to pay the business license tax based on the statutory exemptions that have been recodified in Act 176, and they're found in other parts of the state law as well. Is that all the questions, Fran? Great. So we're going to turn it back over to Caitlin to finish the discussion on and the demonstration of the renewal center.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is good though. Like we said, if you have questions, ask them as we go along, and whomever needs to answer it will jump in. So I'm looking at the cart here. These are the two licenses that I have walked through the process and I want to pay for them. If I change my mind and say, we'll pay for that one later, or I'll pay for it separately, I just deselect it. So I'm going to keep them both in there though. Now it's giving me my payment options. We specifically wanted you to see visually what was going to be the cheaper way for you to pay your license. We don't intentionally want to bog you down with processing fees that are non-refundable. So we want you to be able to pay whatever's the cheapest way you can. And if you're like me, I know when I pay my water bill online, I'll go through the process and enter my bank account. And then I'll go through the process and enter my credit card, and then I'll pay whichever one is cheaper. So here we are showing you which one is cheaper up front. Now, obviously it's cheaper to pay with the bank account, so you would probably do that. I do not have bank account information entered in here because this is test and it won't allow me to enter banking information into test for some reason. The payment processor will not. So we're going to use our credit card. But if you want to use your bank account, the way that works is through micro deposits. You have to set up your account. You have to prove that you are the owner of that account, and that may take up to 3 to 4 days to do that. So you need to log in and make sure your account is attached and everything is approved and authorized before you go in here. Just make sure you don't wait till April 30th and then try to use your bank account, because it's not going to work within the same day. So the way micro deposits work, and you may have done this for something else, but I'll log in here, I'll enter my bank information, which I can add it here on this screen, or I can always go to my user profile and add it there at any time. And you're going to put in your banking information, your routing number, and then Stripe, the payment processor, is going to make a series of micro deposits, 20 cents, 38 cents. And then you will log back in here. And instead of saying add bank, it's going to say verify. And it's going to ask you the amounts of those micro deposits, those 2 or 3 deposits that were made. You enter those. If it matches what they said they sent, we verified that you're the owner of the bank account and you can use the bank account for payment. But today I'm going to use a credit card. And then the address here at the association. Everything else is correct. I'm going to say submit payment. And it's going to tell me that my payment is being processed. Now, once I pay, the business licenses are also submitted to the jurisdiction at the same time. So you have to pay to be able to submit the licenses. You have the ability to print the receipt, but let's talk about how this is going to show up on your bank account or your credit card statement. Each jurisdiction has the ability to type in whatever byline they want to show up, whatever statement descriptor. So it's possible it may say Blenheim business license tax, or it could just say business license tax, but it'll show up however that city or county has entered that statement descriptor. It's also going to show up separately. The reason that we are doing that is because if we didn't do it as separate charges on your account or your credit card, then every single city would be able to see what every other city was getting paid. And we don't want that to happen. So what we've done is you enter your payment information one time, Stripe, the payment processor, takes that, whether it's your credit card or your bank account, and they charge it to each city individually or each county so that they cannot see one another's transactions. So what I'm going to do is I should have gotten an email when I submitted this. So let's go back and see. Okay, it's telling me right there it's been submitted. Again, it gives you the breakdown of what happened, who you submitted it to. I'm going to say return home. Now there is a number of things that can happen right now. It's telling me that the status is that it's submitted and it's under review. It could also say that the status is approved because they've looked at it and they approved it. Blenheim has. It could also say that it's pending feedback. So here it's saying under review, so Blenheim hasn't done anything with it. Hollywood has already looked at it and they're requesting feedback. And we intentionally made these different colors for different reasons. It's because we want to draw your attention to them. This is red because it's telling me that Hollywood looked at it and they're saying that I need a decal and they need to know how many delivery vehicles so that they could mail me a decal for my vehicles. They could also have asked me to upload something. So once I have submitted it, you can see I can't do anything with this license until the city either approves it or asks me for more information. And now that they've asked me for more information, I just do provide feedback and I can log in and change anything that I need to change. I'm going to upload a document. And it has to be one of these file types. I'm going to say continue because it's a PDF. And then I'm also going to write back in the comments, I have 5 vehicles because that's what they were asking about. I'm going to sign it again and resubmit it. Yes, I want to resubmit it. Now you'll see that it did not ask me to pay again because I didn't need to change my gross income amount. There could be the possibility that the city says, hey, I think you reported too much because of these deductions, or I believe you did not report enough. Can you provide more information? And you have the ability to upload the tax return if that's what they ask for. You also have the ability to change the gross income amount. If you change it to a lesser amount, the system is going to automatically refund you your money. If you change it to a greater amount, it's going to make you walk through that process and submit another payment before you can resubmit the application. I will say anything that you upload into the system, any documents that you provide are automatically deleted upon approval from the city. So if I had uploaded my tax return, as soon as Hollywood approves my license, those documents are automatically deleted. They're not stored permanently. So let's refresh here and see. Okay, so you'll see now it says approved by the town of Hollywood. They liked my answer. If you want to know the history of what happened between you and that town, you can do back and forth and see all of that. You can view your renewal. You can download your license directly from here. So once it's approved, you can download and print your license immediately. You also will get an email that tells you that it's been approved, and your license will be inside that email as well. So you don't have to go back into the renewal center. There's my one for Blenheim because it was approved, and my one for Hollywood because it was approved. And that's it. I mean, hopefully you think that it's pretty simple. Fran, is there anything I've forgotten to go over?
No,
Okay,
but we do have a question.
okay.
I don't necessarily renew the same jurisdiction licenses every year. I may not do business every year in all jurisdictions. If I don't renew, will I be able to later renew in the portal?
As long as they are uploading your license account information every year, you will be able to renew. As long as it's not a new license that you're getting.
So long as the city where
Uploads.
you did not do business that year loads your account information into the portal, then yes, you can renew. Otherwise, you would have to start over as a new business, right?
Well, it's kind of multiple tiered. So, so Scott said, as long as the city that you did not do business in uploaded your business information, you can renew. Yes, that is correct. But even if they don't, and they have the ability for you to manually add something, so we have some cities who do not have software that allows them to export business license data. One very large city in South Carolina has that problem. So they would give you the ability to manually add your information. So that first screen where you walk through and I entered my tax information, it would tell me we didn't find any licenses. Instead of saying we found 5, do you want to continue and add them manually? And I would say yes. And then I would manually have to enter my account information, my address, the jurisdiction I'm trying to renew for, all of those things. Now, I'm saying that with the caveat that you are doing a renewal. If you are getting a brand new license, you cannot use the renewal center because this is for renewals only. So, are there any other questions?
But we are working towards.
Yes, we
We
are
are working towards
that.
trying to use it online.
Yes.
To start a business.
And keep in mind, in terms of contractors or individuals who need permits, this system will not handle permitting. So you are still going to have to contact the city for your permit.
Okay.
Anything else?
Hey, if we have to pay with check, how do we go about this?
So the online renewal center is an option for you to pay. If you still want to send a physical check, if you still want to send a physical check to the city to renew, to pay your tax, you can do that. If you want to walk into City Hall and pay your tax, you can do that. This is just another payment option for you if you choose to use it.
We also are working on the process of allowing you to walk through these steps and print your application and then just mail it in with your check.
Yep.
That way you know that the calculation is done correctly and you're not trying to figure it out manually yourself. So if you get to that point and you change your mind, you can just print it and mail it in.
Yeah, use the software as your tax calculator, and then just send in a physical check if you want to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Good question. All right.
Are there any other questions? I'm going to pull up a presentation again. Scott, do you know how to do that? Any other questions? You can take yourself off mute. I'm looking at the, I don't see any other questions. I know we've gone for a solid hour and almost 15 minutes. So I'm not going to keep you any longer. But I did want to put up our last couple of slides. So this is about our law firm. We're in 19 different offices, have 350 attorneys over the Southeast. And then here's our contact information, Jeff and I's. If you'd like a copy of the recording, presentation, slides, as well as the list from MASC on the different jurisdictions that have business license taxes in South Carolina, just email us and we'd be happy to send it out to you. With that, Scott, I don't know if you and your team have anything else. Hope everybody has a great day. God bless and have a Merry Christmas.